apologise for the, as Callum described it, the clickbaity nature of the title. But I'm sure I'll become apparent in a bit. So, starting off, first of all, I'm going to start this talk with a really important slide, one that I've been showing around previously. This is not an attack on Umbraco. So I was very keen that yeah, it's quite an incendiary title, but it's nowhere near an attack on Umbraco. And I want to reduce anxiety of people, especially the couple of people, 3 people here from HQ, and for anyone who thinks that they've come here to see me complain and create fights for the next 45 minutes, 15 minutes or so. And really, to give the game away at the start of the process, the conclusion is yes, Umbraco is viable. I still use it all the time, and this talk explains why that is still the case for me, and it was a really interesting journey for me. Yeah. So why ask the question in the first place? Well, Umbraco is a bit of a bubble. It's a wonderful, amazing, incredible bubble. The community is great. I make some great software with it. It really helps me out in my job. But unfortunately, the technologies used in there are a little bit old at the minute. And last year, about September, well, maybe August, September time, after I'd finished using our framework, I started to look around outside. I kind of came out of my bubble a little bit, and the whole world was talking about .NET Core, and the whole world was talking about technologies that I didn't have much exposure to, and I started to get a little bit worried as a developer about my career and my prospects in the future. And it's all things like Vue and React and stuff like that, and Webpack, and it started to really scare me a little bit. So it caused a bit of a crisis of faith in me, really. It meant that I started to question my commitments to Umbraco. So then I started to go outside and have a serious look around it. So first of all, I'll start the talk by explaining the company that I run, called HiFi. We're a really small agency based in Manchester. There's only 2 people. We work remotely, and we work with medium-sized companies, property developers, distribution companies, things like that. Umbraco is really the only CMS that we use. And our kind of take on a CMS is it's got to be really balanced between these 3 things. Creating content authoring experience is absolutely key for us, because we want the people that use the CMS to have a good experience with it. And content modeling is really important, because that kind of lends into that. And then also the UI mapping from the content model. And then the most important thing is we produce sites that we think are pretty nice and pretty, and we work with some really, really good designers. So it's about us implementing those designs and the design patterns and the design systems in here in the best possible way. And then managing them as well, and allowing it so that people can actually control those designs as well in a really interesting way. So I've got a little video here which shows one of the pages that we've just recently developed, and this is actually only 6 components on the page, and then there's a series of there's a design construct underneath it, the grid effectively, which helps build it. So as you can see there's a lot of differences going on. There's a lot of really interesting things. There's angled backgrounds, there's RTEs, there's different blocks, there's all sorts of things. It's a really long page for a start. And the way that we build things, we tend to build things like that. And we didn't actually build that page. A designer came along and built that page using the system that we'd created for them. And that's kind of key to how we build sites. So to move on from that, this is a tech that we're going to be looking at today. So I'll first look at some web builders, and then go on to some headless CMSs, and then move on to some to WordPress. Initially, bog standard WordPress, and then some and WordPress with a page builder. And sorry, I don't do Episerver, Sitecore, or Kentico, so I really couldn't give any view on that. and it's not something that we do with our customers really. So it's not really relevant to me, which is kind of the perspective of this talk. So first of all, I'll give there's a little video I want to show on Webflow. So Webflow is a web builder, and there's Wix and there's Squarespace that's been around for quite a while. But from my perspective, Webflow is really, really interesting as a company, as a project, as an idea. It's kind of, I think it's the leader in the market very much at the minute. So I'll just show this video.
Over the last 10 years, responsive web design has changed how we create for the web. And the things we design have exploded in complexity. Most of today's websites and apps are now connected with dynamic content that lives in a database. Yet the tools we use to design have been stuck in the past, which has forced us to hire a developer or write complex code just to bring our ideas to life. Webflow is the world's first design platform that integrates live data into an intuitive visual interface, completely removing the need to write code. It's called data-driven design. And all you have to do is tell Webflow the structure of the content you care about, whether it's blog posts, real estate listings, products you sell, or anything else you can think of. Then you create custom designs to fit your dynamic data, with pixel-perfect variations for every resolution. So when you, your team, or your client changes the underlying data, every part of every design linked to that data changes automatically across every device. Under the hood, Webflow creates a hosted database for you, writes all the code to link it to your designs, and automatically generates a CMS so you can quickly edit your content. Now you can create powerful websites quickly, without anything getting in your way. Only with Webflow.
So that's a pretty incredible, it's a great video because it really shows off everything that Webflow is meant to be doing, and it is a very impressive piece of technology. So I'll just go through some key points as to what I think about Webflow. Well, its design really is the driver. That's the core to everything. Everything is about design and making things pretty and then laying content underneath it. So the design system in there is responsive, and it links into CSS Grid, and it links into Flex, so it's pretty adaptable and changeable. And you can create custom UI components in there as well, which is really key, so you're not stuck with whatever they give you. And you can create dynamic content, just as the video said, really, using things called collections or collection lists. And those then link into ways to actually edit them from a very simplified CMS, which is pretty cool considering it all does it all for you. And you can do simple integrations into there. So CRMs like HubSpot, you can integrate into Shopify as well. And they have their own e-commerce in the system as well, which is pretty good. You can link into search and do some localization actually internally within Webflow or externally within an integration. It's all very simple, and it doesn't really go on much more from embeds, but it is possible to do it. And lastly, you can export all the content, all the code behind it. So I think it's done in Node.js, but it's pretty good, the code that you get out of it. And the generated code, the HTML and the output is pretty good as well. So I've got another video that I'd like to show you. So this really is really deep down in kind of the way that Webflow works, and this is more about what I'm interested in is how it handles content modeling, how it understands and breaks up all the content into individual bits so that it can be used throughout the system rather than having a one-to-one relationship between the UI and the data underneath it.
A multi-reference field, which is short for multi-item reference field, does just that. Instead of a reference field, which lets us pick one item from another collection, a multi-reference field lets us pick multiple items. So we have our blog posts, and we have our author at the top of each post. Now, Helen is known throughout the industry for hogging the limelight. However, in a new initiative, we decided to credit other contributors to our blog posts. So we have a little spot on the bottom for contributors. This is all static content right now. It's just the design. Nothing's been added yet from our collection. Let's go into the CMS, into our blog posts collection, and of course, settings. All we have to do is click multi-reference. We can name the field contributors. We can add some clarifying text so anyone using the CMS or the editor knows what to do. But the important part here is that we point our multi-reference field to our authors collection. Here's why. If we save and then go into any of our items, like this blog post by Helen, we can now see our multi-reference field. And all we have to do is choose from the list the other authors who contributed to this post. Once we've done that, let's save. Now, we've only done this on one post so far. We can go back and fill in the rest later. So we're going to build this using the blog post we just configured. Let's drag in a collection list so we can list the contributors. And from the collection dropdown, we can see our brand new field right there. Notice how the authors already show up in the list. And from here, this is just like a normal collection list. Let's go over to our Elements panel and grab a heading. We can drag it right into any item. And of course, we'll get the text from our collection. Our authors are showing up just fine. Warp speed. Actually, we're just changing the velocity of the footage we captured so you don't have to watch us tweak every detail. All right, Dale, let's take it down to normal. Dale. Okay, we're fast forwarding through the entire... Can we? Thank you, Dale. So we just finished setting up our contributors in this collection list. And if we go back into the CMS and we add contributors to another item in our collection, another blog post, we have our multi-reference field from which we can select our contributors. We can add as many as we'd like. And once we're done, let's save and then go back to our collection page. And from the item dropdown, let's pick that blog post we just configured. And at the bottom, we have all our contributors showing up in the collection list. And that's it. Multi-reference fields give us access to multiple items in another collection.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. That considering that there's nothing really gone on there, and the way that they're able to link in and create a design on it is pretty amazing, really. And it's definitely moved on from the old days of Wix and Squarespace. So now I'd like to go into the downsides of that. So I started thinking about it and about what that's actually doing and how we could use it in our agency. So the content modeling, although it's there and although it's really interesting what it's doing there, it is very basic. There is no composition, there is no inheritance, and they have to get around certain things by doing content modeling anti-patterns on there. So things like having a checkbox to set an item as a featured item, which is really not the best way to do things. And there's no possibility of any custom property editors just because of the way it's set up. It's a closed shop. So complex integrations, so integrating into Google Maps or integrating into anything more complicated is not really going to be possible in here. There's no way to push the envelope with the latest tech, so we like to find nice little niche things within CSS to make stuff interesting and different, and to make it stand out. And you really can't do that because you're limited to what CSS they're capable of. The design systems are hard. There may be some way to set up basic sort of colors and things like that, but you cannot systemize anything because there's no code there for you to touch, and everything is manual, and that happens because really it's an editor, and complexity, in my opinion, is the enemy of UX. So Apple, when they released the iPhone, they took everything out, so it's page after page after page of boxes and tick boxes and check things that you have to do, whereas with really coding and especially automating of coding can make things a little bit easier to do because there's no reusability. So it's really just Photoshop or Sketch or Figma or something like that with an editor on top of it. And it's impossible, as I just said, it's impossible to reuse, compose, or automate functionality in there unless you stick something crazy like Cypress on top of it to automate the production of your sites, which probably wouldn't be the best idea. And you're only restricted to their box of tricks. A very nice box of tricks it is, but it's still only a box of tricks. So next, I'd like to have a look at the Headless CMS. So a Headless CMS is where you disconnect everything completely. So just give me a second. It's been doing this today. to show you a video here, and my PowerPoint's been a pain. Cool. Oh, it just came back as well.
Digital is no longer just a place to sell. It's how brands help customers learn, buy, and enjoy their products. Content is the core of these digital experiences, but how do brands manage content across so many channels? Some are still using a legacy CMS, one for each website or app, that makes building and updating really tough, especially at scale. Now, there's a modern way to manage content. Start by unifying your content in a single hub that can flow into any digital channel. Next, structure your content so it's easy to reuse. An intuitive web app lets you input content, preview it, and then update without code, sending fresh content to your hub and into every digital experience. Meanwhile, developers can integrate tools like translation, segmentation, and search, so you're ready for the next innovation. It's the modern approach to content management to accelerate your next digital experience. Contentful.
So yeah, that's really interesting. Again, I really take offense a little bit about their use of the words modern and legacy. There's lots of different ways to do things, and design and development is not really, in my opinion, it's not really an evolution. It's more of an artist palette, and you choose what works best. But anyway, that's the way of it. So let's have a look at some key points behind Contentful. So content model very much is the driver here. That's all they're interested in. The presentation layer doesn't really exist. When you set up a headless site, then you really have to do all of that yourself. And I've sometimes heard this called as content as a service, and content providers. The idea is it's a software as a service provision, and you get all your content from there, and you manage it in the interface. It's really important for omnichannel, and by omnichannel I mean lots of different consumers of your content, and sometimes I think that maybe it's a bit overkill for anything smaller than that. And it introduces this idea of structured content, which is basically taking content modeling to the next level and making sure that everything is about the content being, the content is defining its meaning. So things like team members and things like that, products and all that. So it's a decoupled architecture. So you can develop each individual part separately. It's easy to evolve the content model, so the content model can change without it really impacting on your front end, as long as you don't do anything crazy. So it's if you've got content model that changes quite a lot, it can make a big difference there, and it can also create rapid development. But I've yet to see that happen. You can also change the content editing experience. So they've got a way to import React components into the admin area, which means the back office is really updatable, and you can change lots of things, and you can do delivery by either dynamically or statically. So one is you create the site, and then it calls either it uses a cache or it calls down to Contentful API on each particular render of the page, whether it's via a server or it's via the client side, or you get something to build the site every time that something changes and pushes up to a static delivery mechanism. There is a free tier for Contentful, but it is a little bit limited. So I've got another from a different headless provider. I really love this video, really interesting. This is how to deal with previews.
Being able to quickly preview is super helpful for when you're authoring. So now you can wire up live web previews right next to where you're editing, so you can easily check your work. But we think your content needs to be able to travel anywhere. For example, some people just see things differently, so maybe you want previews that let you see things from their perspective. and maybe previews for print PDFs, search and social.
Or for when you're authoring for voice interfaces, like me, face with open eyes and mouth with head exploding.
Digital content is everywhere, so we made sure you can build previews for whatever you're working on, so they can help you author for all the places your structured content can go. Preview anything with Sanity.io.
I really like that idea of having different components. So this is another thing that I took from the Sanity.io site, and this is where Headless starts to feel a little bit wrong to me. So I'll just read out the bolded sections. Generally make content models that reflect your content means rather than how is it presented, which I've talked about a little bit. No assumptions about presentation, no colors, floats. We think it's better to leave those kind of concerns to your code. They can add complexity, not just to the implementation, but also to the things editors need to keep track of. And that seems to me like very much passing the buck. It seems to be a little bit lazy. I can understand why they're doing it, and in omnichannel and things like that, it'll probably work very well. But design context and content editors are not just people that fill boxes of text in. They can also be designers, and it seems to be me that they're leaving a little bit behind there, because there is no design management system that sits alongside this that allows you to understand the design context or to add things. So it's down to coding basically, which is becomes quite hard for designers to do, and that's not really their job. So take some downsides of the Headless side. So for me, is it a CMS, or is it just a big DB full of random collections of content? Because a lot of them really lacking some structure and some context behind things. And I like this phrase of content author disassociation, because if you don't get your content model right, then you could end up with people not. The content author is not understanding what actually this is used for. And yes, you can preview it, you can preview the components, but it's about previewing it in context sometimes. And if you sat on a component, then you can't really do that. And meaning is implied by the data. So I've already talked about this, and because we do quite a lot is we have design fragments. So things that look pretty that are designed to contain different types of data, usually for explaining things or for diagrams and things like that. And those really are not possible using the content model, because you'd have these two things that are completely different. The content means completely different things, but they would have to sit next to each other because they have the same schema attached to them. There's also limited functionality out of the box, because especially with Contentful, you end up with, I think, 8 property editors, and then this one at the end that's just called JSON, which you can then attach to create property editors over the top of it, which is a good idea, but it doesn't give much out of the box really. And there's a very limited community behind this. Not many plugins that I could find, and very few property editors for you to download, unlike Umbraco. So for me, it might be a bit overkill for smaller sites, especially if those sites grow, because you're suddenly hit by the next pricing plan, and it ignores the presentational settings and the design contents, and that might be by design, but I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think it's a bit more grey than that. It's a very black and white perspective to take. You have to get the content model right. Yeah, although you can evolve it, then it's you have to get it right. You've got to know what you're doing. I've heard of Contentful sites before that have moved away from it because they've not got it right, and it's hard for people to understand and to use. It's a closed source thing, so you can't get in and start to tweak and play around with structures and things like that. And it can be hard to create or to understand the infrastructure, which is why a lot of these systems, they give you starter kits to be able to understand how to code all of this stuff and attach it to Gatsby or to Nuxt or to anything within that sphere. So talking a little bit more about the delivery mechanism. So the server-side delivery, where you have a server that connects to the the Contentful APIs and pulls back the information and then renders it on the screen and sends it is obviously if it's an API that's outside of your servers, an SQL server or whatever, then it's going to be lower performance. Whatever you do, it's going to be lower. Client-side delivery is exactly the same thing. You'll be connected to APIs. You may be caching some data, but you will be connecting. And then it's difficult to implement, or it's harder to implement. Increases complexity, and SEO is a bit harder to manage, although not impossible. And the static site generating, which is the way that a lot of people tend to go to, but it very much complicates the publishing, makes it harder to preview, which is why people like Gatsby have a preview service attached to it, which you can start using. And there's also a potential of stale data because it can take a while to publish, which is why people are starting to do split publishing and all sorts of crazy stuff to try and get over that problem, which is they're trying to solve a problem that we've solved a long time ago. Anyway, I won't go into that. Prices can be really crazy. So there are some headless solutions out there like Prismic, which tends to be a little bit cheaper. But yeah, Contentful, when you start paying for it, is pretty expensive. And Kentico Content, which I really like and does solve some of these problems with design context and things like art, but it is far too expensive for me. £1,000 a month, my customers would just be not willing to pay that really. And I've already said there's a really big jump in fees when your resources go over a planned boundary. So moving on to WordPress now. So this is the Gutenberg editor that was released the last major release, I think 2 years ago.
People use WordPress because it allows them to create and customize amazing content. And while it's the easiest CMS out there, it can be a little hard to get started. It often requires a bunch of shortcodes, widgets, embeds, and custom HTML. Gutenberg changes that. Gutenberg is the new visual editing experience that brings the full potential of WordPress to every user, regardless of their technical expertise. It's all powered by blocks, a more intuitive way to build engaging content. With blocks, you can add, rearrange, and customize content and media without getting bogged down in code. So if you want to insert a video, add overlay text, and do a little resizing, you can in seconds. Same for galleries, background images, whatever you can dream up. That's because Gutenberg reimagines the way we work with content, enabling users to deploy both advanced and basic functionality with equal ease. This creates a more streamlined and consistent user experience that allows you to build great content faster. Doesn't matter what content you're creating, whether you're building a website for your small business, making your lifestyle blog more interactive,
Sorry about that.
Or giving your portfolio site a fresh new look. WordPress makes it easy for anyone to take their vision and put it on the screen without the barrier of code. And if you want to go a step further, you can find hundreds of blocks in the plugin directory, or create your own custom blocks. Because ultimately, Gutenberg is about simplifying the process, not the result, so you can create the same premium content without any limitations. The easier way to make your vision a reality. Gutenberg, available in WordPress.
So let's have a look at some of the key points behind Gutenberg. I've been calling it Gutenberg all day. So it's a visual content editor, very similar to the grid in Umbraco with .NET Grid Editor attached. It's mobile friendly. You can create custom components, UI components. There's lots of built-in blocks for it as well, which make a big difference. And you can integrate with lots of systems and some themes and some plugins, maybe, possibly, sometimes. So let's look at some downsides to the Gutenberg side. I tried to get a video to sit in between, but there is no videos I'm going to work out there. So content modeling is code first. So you do it in PHP. and that makes the inheritance and the composition more difficult to do than something like Umbraco, and it's a lot harder to understand. And it's hard. A lot of people have said it's hard compared to the default editing experience. Personally, I'm not sure, but that's what people are saying. People prefer to go in and click on text areas and just edit it there. I can kind of see a point, but yeah, anyway. There are limited themes behind it that support it. It's been in beta since the release of version 5, which is 2 years ago now, and it's still there. They said they were going to launch it in August last year, and it never happened. It creates a lot of front-end bloat. The markup it creates is not clean, and it has an incredibly bad reputation. If you Google for this, then loads of people complain about it all the time. Out of like 3,500 reviews on the WordPress site, it's like 2,200 one-star ones. So it's not a popular thing. I don't think it's fair to say. And finally, the most important thing is WordPress security, which if I had £100 for every person that comes to me and says, I've got a WordPress site and it's no longer working, and we look into it and it's been hacked and gone, then I'd probably be able to retire now, because it happens all the time. So I've got, this is the next section. So Gutenberg really, I don't think is viable at the minute anyway. So this is a page builder that exists for WordPress. I'll show you this.
Welcome to our quick tour that will help you get started with Elementor. When you first enter Elementor, you'll see the content area displayed on the right. Here, you can view and edit the various elements on the page. On the left is the panel where you can choose from the different widgets and control their settings. Your first step is to add a new section. When adding a section, you can choose from 12 different column layouts. Let's go ahead and choose 3 columns. To resize the width of the columns, click on the side of the column and drag it left or right. Time to add some content to the page. Simply drag and drop one of the many widgets available on the panel. After dragging the widget to the page, the panel will automatically switch to show the widget settings. The first tab of this panel is called Content. Here, you can edit the content of the widget. The second tab is Style, where you can change styling attributes like alignment and text colors. The third tab is Advanced. This lets you control more advanced settings like margin and padding. By clicking on the Column button, you get the settings panel for the column you've clicked on. You can add a new column by clicking on the plus button. You can also click on the Duplicate button to duplicate the entire column, or delete it by clicking on the X button. You can also grab a column and move it to a different position within the section, or move it to a different section altogether. Sections are also movable. Grab one of the sections and drag it above or below other sections. Clicking on the Section button will open the Section Settings panel. Here you can use the Duplicate and Delete buttons in much the same way as shown with the column. To make sure your design is responsive, click on the Display button located at the bottom of the panel. From here, you can switch between desktop, tablet, and mobile views. Want to see how your page looks like? Press the arrow in the middle of the panel to hide the panel. Don't forget to press Save to save your work. I hope you've enjoyed this quick tour of Elementor. If you want to learn more, visit docs.elementor.com.
So yeah, that's really good as well. I really like the way that they allow you to move things around context and change where components sit. It's like using the same thing but as the grid editor, but actually on the page, which is really interesting, really cool. So a couple of key points about Elementor. So it's design and content model led. So you've got the content model that sits in WordPress, and then you've got a design layer on top of it, which sits together, which kind of hits some of the things that I want to be able to do. And the design and content can be edited in the same interface. So you can create a series of roles, role-based permissions to lock down the design, so the client can't come in and change something to bright pink. So they can only go in and edit the content on there. And the design system and the interface really, it's responsive, but it only responds based on Flex, which to me is probably a little bit old school. You can do grid, but it's very hacky. You can create custom UI components as well. attached to it in a thing called the template library, and you can do inline content editing. So I've got one last video to show you, and this is some of the stuff from Elementor 3 around design systems, which I found very interesting.
It's been over 2 years since Elementor released its groundbreaking version 2.0. Since then, Elementor has been established as the leading platform for website building. In the past few months, we've been working on what we believe to be the new way to build sites with Elementor. Introducing Elementor 3.0 with 3 main features: a global design system, a brand new theme builder, and exciting performance improvements. A website design system contains all of the components needed to build a consistent and complete website. It syncs your team and your client around how everything on your site should look and behave. Elementor's design system features include site settings, where you can define your site identity, global colors and typography, lightbox, layout, custom CSS, and theme style. Start by choosing your site's 4 basic global colors. Then, go into any color style in Elementor and set it to be one of them. You can also add as many custom colors to the list and give them a meaningful name. I'll call this one my awesome blue color. Now, if you change one of those colors, it will reflect anywhere that site is used across your site. Mixing and matching colors during your web design process has never been easier. The same global logic applies to typography. Set your site's fonts and font styles and apply them globally across your entire site. If you want to change one of these settings, you'll only need to change it once, and it will affect text throughout your site. There are plenty of global settings to explore, including lightbox settings, site identity, and more. A design system also includes the structure of your website. This is why we've gathered all your site parts in one visual place. Meet the new and improved Theme Builder. After 2 years of leading the industry with our theme builder, we are now setting an even higher bar with a completely new visual experience, more intuitive than ever. Every Elementor website is made up of reusable global parts: your header, footer, single post, archive, and so on. The new theme builder gathers these parts together all in one screen, right inside the editor. This eases the process of creating, managing, and accessing every part of your site, all from one place and visible at a glance. Click the blue plus icon to create a new site part. Then insert a template or create your own. Set a condition, and that's it. You'll now be able to see your new site part appear in the locations you set. There is one more thing.
I'll stop it.
Since site performance is one of those.
So I'll talk about some of the downsides of Elementor. So as you probably saw from the videos, the spacing is based on pixels rather than rems, which they've probably done that because it's easier for people to understand. But from our perspective, it's crucial really to use rems. There is no spacing or font scaling, so you don't set on a logarithmic scale. So it's really easy for somebody to come in and break the balance of your site. And that's how I think that sites become really nicely designed nowadays. According to when I did some research, then the images are really hard to get right. Image processing and things like that are really difficult, and it can just break stuff all the time. And it's easy to break responsive as well. There's apparently no white label templates in there, so if you want to create a new site from scratch, you need to take one of their themes and pull it apart to start again. And all the themes tend to be quite Mickey Mouse and a little bit oversimplified from what I've read about it. And that design system editor, whilst it looks really good, is very oversimplified, and there's no systemization behind it at all, which we do all the time. And makes life a lot easier and better to update the site. The resulting markup and the CSS is, to be honest, not very good. And the front end bloat is quite excessive and tends to slow down your sites. But it apparently is getting better, although we didn't see the video of that. So what I've come to now is can HiFi use any of these solutions? So we've looked through some things on these videos and these different technologies out there, and yeah, they're all really cool. They're all really interesting, but do they really fit what we do? And the answer is no, not really, unfortunately, because we specialize in content modeling, and we've got one set of systems there that are really interested in content modeling, and we've got another set of systems out there that are really interested in the design side, and nothing really in the middle. And with the design thing, everything tends to be point and click, which is whereas we tend to produce sites that have systems underneath them, where we're very careful about the points where we allow people to change things, the interface that the designers are allowed to use to update stuff. So you're not just throwing everything at them, you give them a limited thing that links to their brand and their design system and their design patterns. And that allows us to reduce the complexity of whatever we put out there and be able to understand how different state breaks down components and designs to create solutions that are realistically supported and can be understood over a long time, instead of stuff that's going to break down in the future. So I'll start to go a little bit through now where Umbraco sits against all of these solutions. And it's really fair of me, I'm going to start with Umbraco, but it's really unfair of me to compare it to Webflow, because Webflow's been around for 8 years and has had a lot of money thrown at it, and who knows, I've been here for 6 months. So Uno contains no code Umbraco, so it's great to be able to bolt something up and get that great editing experience. It's really easy to understand the previews and what you're actually building, especially with the new block list editor, which is really cool. You can export your code just like Webflow as well, and it's always up to date and via the cloud updating mechanism. It excludes in-page editing, and there is, I've put it on this side, the in-page designing is in its early stages, I think, at the minute, and I'm sure it'll get better later on. And you can't really create custom blocks at the minute, and you can't have multiple themes, although here themes are coming again later on. So take on the Umbraco Hardcore side. So there's a RESTful API there. It's got GraphQL and webhooks. Umbraco Forms, which I think is really interesting that they put this into the mix, because no other real headless solution actually has any Umbraco Forms behind it at all, any form provider behind it. I think it's because Umbraco has it already, so they might as well bundle it in there, whereas other providers just let you just do it yourself. It's really great content modeling user experience behind it. And there's a new preview API which allows you to see what you're doing before you actually push it out. And you can, the other side of this is that you can include design context, which is what I've been talking about. So you can include the grid in there if you really want to, or the block list editor, which has settings attached. So things that are not really meant for the content, but you can use it if you want to. So it's like a grey solution. It's not black and white. You can do it any way you want to, which is really nice. But it excludes a content management API at the minute, which I think is kind of key to having a headless solution. Being able to programmatically create a form of document types and data types and all those types of things, and create properties on document types is really important. It's the same with the images API, being able to pull out and do image processing and things like that. And the starter projects, there's not that many of them. There's one that I found based on Nuxt and Vue, but it would be nice to be able to have a few more. You can't do component library previews, that I showed earlier on, and there's no CLI at the minute. And bespoke community plugins are not available at the minute, but a lot of that stuff I know is on the way, and would be good to see. So this is the story that the argument everybody's been having for the last 10 years. So it includes the grid with .tak grid editor with design context, which I think is one of the best ways of doing it. I really like the idea of editing in page, but being able to click on something and then edit the content there and choose different blocks and different components is a much better way of doing it. And the block list editor only makes that better. And sometimes that separation is much better for the content authorer because they don't have to think about it. They just go to a box and fill it in, and that's it. It's very clean markup separation, so you don't get any of this bloat. The models builder is absolutely excellent. I use it on every project, and it's an awesome thing. And there's very good security. There's full control over everything by the open source nature of it, and also there's loads of ways you can hook into things, and it makes it really easy to integrate into systems. So as I've already said, content entry in context is not really possible at the minute, as is design in context, but I'm not sure of the value behind some of those things. And maybe sometimes it's better to step back, and the users of Umbraco prefer to do what we do, which is create everything in components separately and not do it in a WYSIWYG editor. There's a low number of pre-built templates, so there's a couple of there's a few starter kits out there, and some of them are really, really good. But I think they're very limited by the starter kits, which I think are very difficult to use, and really a kind of a thing that lets down Umbraco in a lot of ways. So now comes the question really is that you already know the answer to, but is Umbraco still valid as a CMS in 2021? So when I came to this end of this, looking through all this amazing, incredible technology, and I spent a long time thinking about all of this stuff and deciding where I was going to take things. And then I read this book about 2 months ago now. And it's a book by Dean Barker, who talked a couple of years ago at Code Garden about content modeling. And really, it's not a book about content modeling, it's a book about what a CMS should be. It's quite dry in a lot of ways because it just plods through how a CMS should be built. And Umbraco kind of started to make a lot of sense to me, because Umbraco has this amazingly small footprint. If you look at a lot of things out there, then they tend to be, like if you go to things like Sitecore or Episerver or Kentico, then they tend to be very bloated. There's a lot going on in there. Whereas having read that book, I mean, every page was, that's an Umbraco feature, that's an Umbraco feature. So it's really, really lean in its construction, which is a really nice thing, in my opinion. So I talked about this kind of at the start of the talk, and when I'm really interested in balance, I'm really interested in how different things work together and how we get to compromise and how we get the best out of a system. So what I did was I took the content author and experience, the content model, or the data really, and the design side of things. And I started to look at how each of these different things apply to it. So if we look at website builders first, so they're more interested in the design. They have a little bit, or Webflow specifically has a little bit of interest in the content authoring and a little bit of interest in the content modeling. So if we look at Headless, then Headless doesn't care about design at all, and it's more interested in the content modeling, and it's more interested in it's a little bit interested in the content authoring experience. And WordPress kind of sits a little bit more towards the design and the content authoring, in my opinion, and it's less interested in the content modeling side of things. But then I started to look at Umbraco, and Umbraco for me kind of really sits in the middle, because from a design perspective, you can design whatever you want, and then you can have previews attached to it. the content authoring is brilliant. The content modeling, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, you've got to know what you're doing a little bit and have a bit of experience, but you can do whatever you want with it. So for me, this is one of the reasons of me wanting to still use Umbraco, because it's a very balanced solution, which is a nice thing, and it leads to less compromise when I'm creating sites. So it takes me on to Umbraco's an unopinionated toolkit. So what I've done is I've morphed my business model around a lot of the ways that Umbraco does things, which might be right or might be wrong, but because it's very, very unopinionated, and because it'll flex to whatever I need it to do, really, and because it'll leave me alone and just act as a really nice, easy to use CMS for the most part, then it leaves me to run my business in exactly the way that I want to run it, and to innovate, which is what we do with Yuzu, with positional content, with a lot of the things that we do at HiFi. And I think a lot of that is because Umbraco is kind of focused on being a really good content authoring experience, really easy for customers to use, as long as you set it up in the right way. And whenever I talk to customers who have used Umbraco, that they always give me incredible feedback on the usability of it. And it allows subtlety. So as I've said before, I'm not interested in black or white things. I'm interested in grey things. I'm interested in things that will allow me to bend them, to make a decision based on the current needs as to what I want to do. So if I want to do content modeling and it's needed and it's important, then I can do it. If I want to do page building, I can do it as well. I think this is one of the areas where Headless really has struggled in a way, especially when it's trying to invade smaller markets. Is people, they went to people and they said, oh, look at this great thing. And it is great being able to have a CMS that's hosted elsewhere, that you don't need to worry about servers and etc. But then suddenly people like, how do I build my pages? And they've started to put those in there now. And there's some headless solutions that are starting to think about it and to try and do it. But really, at the end of the day, they struggle because their whole remit is content modeling and structure. They're not really interested in the design side of things, and they believe that it pollutes things, as that quote said. So Umbraco, one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is I've met lots of really cool, really nice, really good friends in this experience. I mean, it's been, for the last 5 years that I've been doing this, it's changed me as a developer. Very much so, and getting involved in the community was one of the best things personally that I've done. And if I wouldn't really have had the confidence to come and sit here and give this talk sort of 3 or 4 years ago, so it's really improved me personally, and it's got a really great improving selection of companion apps now, Marketing Suite and Vendor and my framework Yuzu, and Uskins, which I've only started to really look at seriously. I went to a meetup a couple of weeks ago, and I think they're on the verge of getting to the point where they're going to be able to do in-context editing, and that is really nice to see in Umbraco, and the way that they're thinking about having a template underneath a solution that's the base layer, and then you layer a skin on top of it. So it's a white label, and then you put your style on top of it is really fantastic and really exciting. And they're doing an amazing job. And then USync, which is just a great thing to get. And it's starting to understand headless and website builders. I know that they've got a limited amount of time in HQ, so this is a process. So I'm willing to be patient on this and see all these things, because whenever I hear anything about it, they say they're adding new things to these systems all the time. And finally, when I started using Umbraco, I asked somebody, how do you do this? and they said, how do you do content deployment? And they said, copy the database or something crazy like that, and or do it manually. And this has always been my biggest bugbear with Umbraco, and finally it's completely solved. Usync Complete is an incredible solution, and I'm very sorry Umbraco Deploy, but it's an incredible thing, and it just works, which is kind of what you want, and Kevin Jubb's done a great job on it. And it's finally embracing all those new technologies. So we're going to have this .NET Core in a beta at least in May, and then hopefully a release later in the year. And they're doing a back office update because, and I'm really excited and interested in the way that they're approaching that, and trying to do a framework agnostic approach of using web components, which is a really interesting way of thinking about it, and that's the way that I tend to think. So I'm super excited to see what comes out of that. So you already knew the answer to this, but the answer from me is yes, really. If you'd asked me last year, I probably would have been sat on the fence, but having been out there, and yes, there are some amazing technologies out there, but sometimes you have to look at the nuts and bolts underneath it. Sometimes you have to look at the basics, and it's about really getting the basics right and being able to adapt it and change it to your business model and the needs of your customer. And for me, Umbraco still does that. There's still things wrong with it, but no system's ever perfect. And I think that the foundations have been laid there, and especially with Umbraco 8, and it's about really looking at .NET Core and the back office, and a lot, as I said, a lot of the investment really has come in the UX, and the things that it can do really are quality of life for content authors, really, and that's who we serve. I often say that a content management system is a tube between the content author and the output that you get at the end of it, the consumer views on the web page, and everything else in there doesn't really matter a huge amount. If you look after your content authors and you look after the output, then nothing else really can go wrong. So that's the end of my talk, and thank you very much for listening. I'm sure there's going to be lots of opinions and questions.